infrastructure to drive renewable energy the way there is for fossil fuel energy and nuclear. There's not a price on carbon, and there's not a national renewable portfolio standard. The various loan programs the tax credits that are the incentives are great, but even those are not permanent. So it really behooves states, and that's why you're seeing so much activity at the state level, to step in and fix that in the absence of federal activity. This is just some of the information on the subsidies report, which I think I covered most of this, but just to show you the orders of magnitude difference between renewable subsidies at $400 million versus $2 billion and $4 billion in nuclear and oil and gas in their first 15 years. Yeah. These are just some more graphs about that. So, in conclusion, and again, we can get into some of these ways we could fix things. Supporting our nation's new energy technologies is what we've always done, and it's been a key driver to our success as a country and as an economy. And so we shouldn't really change that. We should continue that. We're driving significant economic growth. We're creating over 100,000 jobs, according to the most recent study of renewable job creation, and Tesla and SolarCity and SunPower are all great homegrown examples in our own state. California has been a leader and is widely recognized as such, but we can't just rest on our laurels, because other states and countries are eyeing us and are winning in many cases by investing in this industry. So what really the California legislature has an opportunity to build upon the policies that we've created as a state, and make sure that the jobs created by those policies, at least a big chunk of them, stay here. And so some of the ideas that I mentioned, net metering is important. This green bank, I think, is something to explore. The CEQA adjustments or review that was talked about earlier, the public goods charge, and perhaps these packages, which could be in the form of a green bank or just incentive packages that create low interest loans or grants or tax forgiveness, are some of the tools that others are using successfully, and I don't see any reason why California couldn't do the same. Thank you.
Before I introduce Mr. Yin, just a quick question, Nancy. You mentioned the companies that you have been investing in, many of them are solar, and what has struck me is the fact that within our California's electricity mix, we get a great deal of, we get more from wind than we do from solar at the current moment, yet we have no wind manufacturing facility in California. We have wind installations, obviously, but we don't have a wind manufacturing facility, and I wondered if you had any insight as to perhaps why.
Well, most of the wind industry went to Europe when the tax credits were yanked from it, many, many years ago, and so we lost that battle, in the early 90s. And wind has been a more mature technology and has more intermittency in terms of the California peak than solar does. So it hasn't been as popular. What you're seeing now is more distributed wind, which will be great for California. You're also seeing repowering, taking the Altamont or the Tehachapi wind farms that are old and inefficient and repowering them. So I think we actually have on the horizon an opportunity to bring wind back to California, and certainly one of our companies is very much involved in that, and we've been talking to them, early days about how to develop some of their assembly locally, which they're very interested in doing, because it's very, in the case of a wind turbine, transporting those things is very expensive and it's very difficult. So the closer you are to your farm, the better. And so there have been the good news is that there have been some advances in the way turbines are designed and manufactured that will enable them quite possibly to do some amount of the the end stage of the assembly and manufacturing in the state.
Great. And later, I would like to dig down, if we have a chance, into we've had mention of CEQA reform at least now twice in our panels, but we haven't really, CEQA is obviously a huge document, but maybe we can dig down into that a little bit. Mr. Yin. Henry Yin is the California Commissioner for Economy and Development, a founder of USA-China Link, co-founder of Green Laboratories, and he held engineering and managerial positions with McKee, Kume, and Dictaphone, and was Director of Manufacturing Engineering for Silicon Graphics in Mountain View, California. Henry.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me over here. I have heard a lot of very, very sophisticated and very exciting information on the technology advancement and also as much as investment. I may have a chance to offer a different perspective about this topic from me as a commissioner. What particularly the part that might be somehow informative to everyone over here. I heard a lot about concern of competition from China, India, and other states, and I hope that my information maybe is in-house helpful as a better understanding about our competitors, or hopefully those can be our partners in certain way. Well, due to limited amount of time, I'm going to focus my presentation on what China's move into clean technology manufacturing means for California. Of course, as you can tell, that I'm Chinese American, but I've been here for 37 years. Of course, being commissioner, I have a good reason to care about California. So for the concern about maintaining good economic development, as the previous governor assigned me to do, I devote the last 16, 18 months to 3 different trade missions to China on green technology. Luckily, that in the very last one, we're fortunate to have our Assembly member Wachowski to come along with us, so we had some kind of a observation together. But what I've been focused on was trying to gain information about green technology developed in China, as much as their trade relationship with the U.S., particularly with California. Therefore, I had a chance to meet with all different levels of organization, from a government. The first 2 you can tell, those are the governing body of energy policy, toward the manufacturing and the trading. Then the third one was academic schools focused on the energy and environment, where we had a chance to meet with a 30-plus business in clean tech. The next one, the Guangdong High-Tech Chamber of Commerce, likewise, we also had opportunity to meet directly with them and asking about their concern. When you export your products to California or other part of the U.S., what happened to be your exciting or not too exciting part? That means I was trying to gain the story from the other side. Finally, I had a chance to meet with more than 10 private investor firms. They are also investing very large amount of money onto clean technology, both in China and in U.S. Finally, I had a chance to meet with many specialists with the semi and other clean tech industry in Silicon Valley. Well, I hope this demo will not disturb a lot of folks. I also came from high tech in Silicon Valley. I don't mean that clean tech is not high technology, but I'm saying compared with the traditional semiconductor, the clean tech happen to be much lower cost required to get into the business. That's why I call it low-tech consumer product, but quickly expand from high-tech in a few years. It's definitely a global-wide new trend. However, the supply-demand has caused a problem. That's why we're here today. But both China and California happen to be the energy sourcing company depending on the 8 different amount of times. The China was not really sense about this problem until only the less than 10 years. However, they came along very quickly about getting from energy sourcing into technology innovations. However, they realized that they are far away from the innovation level of what California and other U.S. states may have. Last but not least, China and California both are the OEM, original equipment manufacturers, now all become a consumer's market. So there are definitely a lot of competition between these two regions, as much the opportunity for cooperation. I'm not in technical field, but I'm just trying to clearly clarify this. Of course, any specialist in the back can correct me if I'm wrong, that there are 2 major camps of technology in the clean tech, as far as the solar energy. The first one called SI or PV module technology, which occupy 90% of the global market, offering 18% approximately the electricity converting rate, versus the other one, thin film, is only 10%, and this one is actually led by the U.S. Now, here's an interesting comparison. What happened to China in the last few years versus Europe, and then the impact to the U.S., including California. It happened that China has been the low-cost leader in making solar cells and module with we call the SI PV module technology. That is the second part. However, in the meantime, California certainly holds the technology in the raw material, which requires to make those the modules. China government, from the top management in Beijing, has very aggressive plan of developing green technology. That's why I get a copy of the next 12 years, 5-year plan. I'm not going to go through detail over here. But in the meantime, there are lots of investment funds, we call the VC in China, heavily involved or invest into the clean tech. That's why making 500 plus equipment manufacturing business, that is just too much, in my opinion. Therefore, many of them lack of service and support, inconsistent quality. But surprisingly, this number that shared with me, 90% of those products have been exported to Europe. Only 2% came to USA. So percentage-wise, it's very small in the last few years. However, the situation has been changed when Europe, which used to hold 90% of global-wise consumer market of clean technology, now has been impacted by the slow economy. Therefore, they are dumping the products to U.S. recently, and their manufacture becomes 600% oversupply. That is definitely a very serious number. Now, the last statement that happened to be somehow relevant, saying the FOB cost reduced by 50% in 1 year from approximately $2 to only 90 cents per watt. Now, this number may not be so accurate, but at least somehow could give us some idea that why we have been experiencing such a very tough competition. We can see the reasons, we can see the numbers. Here's my recommendation, which may not be that much, but again, just my 2 cents idea. Of course, being a commissioner, I encourage fair competition on the basis of technology, quality, cost, and the services, particularly for the clean technology. Without all 4, and again, we can hardly compete with anyone. It doesn't matter whether other state or other countries. Well, first of all, I feel that we need to recognize and maintain California's core value in technological advances and job creation, which include most of those statements that by other panelists stated earlier. That we have created and we can create high-paid jobs in providing the Poly C, which is the raw material to make solar cells, the equipment itself, the system integration, the local installation, and the services. I was told that for every installed system, 73% of revenue have been generated by this portion. So only the other 1/4 could be from the material from overseas or other state. Now we realize America is 1.9 billion exporter of a clean product to China. So actually, we gain a lot of export advantage. Number 2, acknowledge China's advantage in cost competitiveness. Maintaining low-cost job in China for the solar cell and module, which is 80% of the labor content. Now, I heard one statement from one of the panelists earlier that he'd rather leave that low-cost job there so that he or his company will be focused on making the high profit margin portion. So that's why I'm saying that encouraging the rest of 20% of system assembly in California, offering the local consumer better service and better protections. The last slide's over here, the leverage of long-term steady consumer market. Now, the number 4, in my opinion, that we need to set California a higher standard on product quality and system services. I was told that we should make a UL proof a must on all of our product elements, including imported or homemade items. Number 2, probably requiring all 1,000 or more solar system installer in California to have C46, which is solar general contractor license, rather than B10. Yeah. And then, of course, in my opinion, the consumers need to have that 20-year system warranty and meaningful and credit to themselves. Now, if installers put the system imported from overseas cannot provide or back up that 20-year warranty to the consumer, then consumer will get very questionable quality products. It doesn't matter from where. The last one, I would suggest to take advantage of China's private funding, particularly with the EB5. Currently, 2/3 are from China.
Tell us more about the, I don't understand this. What do you say, EB5 program?
The EB5 is the federal program to motivate immigrants with $500,000 or $1 million investment onto U.S. domestic business. Yeah, it's a visa program. So whatever, depending on the employment rate in that particular county, the federal government will determine whether $500,000 or $1 million will be required for this for the visa applicants to get permanent residence. So that's a quick money we can get. Yeah. Okay, and finally, I'm still devoting a lot of efforts in this area myself, including that I'm going to offer reception of a China delegation from NDRC in early January. I plan to organize 2 more trade delegations on clean tech to China. And last one, with support from government or local community, I plan to put together a California Green Investment Summit in early next year. And I certainly hope that I can bring in more resources from China, and again, encourage dialogue and the partnership between California and China. But anyway, the bottom line is I like to see the technology being maintained over here. The job will be created here for Californians. In the meantime, well, we can take advantage of whatever meaningful and good quality, low-cost product from either China or India or anywhere, so that we will be able to, keep our technology advancement in the clean tech in California. Thank you.
Thank you both. I'm sure we all have questions. That I have an immediate question to as a fund manager, and when you're looking at investments, how much is, Mr. Yin described that and I'm interpreting some, but that the competition from China might really be considered primarily just in the manufacture of certain components, and that actually in the broader activity, which is has a higher value, that actually we're not experiencing, or the competition from China is insignificant. And I wondered how much is a factor of the competition from China in you're looking at companies and their activities.
Well, it's a huge factor. Certainly, California leads at manufacturing where you need to be close, where it's still very close to the innovation cycle. And I mean, I used to work in the semiconductor industry. We didn't move fabs offshore for many, many years after the integrated circuit was developed because we needed that connection between headquarters, between R&D and manufacturing. And that's one of the reasons Tesla was so happy to site in Fremont, because it's headquartered in Palo Alto, and they need that back and forth. So that's one of our strong suits. I mean, we should keep at least the first decade or so of all manufacturing where we're the innovator, and we can do that. But what happens is that these companies are approached by Chinese authorities or companies or a combination of that, and China wants them to have a product in a manufacturing place in China, and they're willing to write checks to do that, and there's a playbook. I mean, people know how to do that, and it's happening every day. There's also a playbook for OPIC, for example, has a lot of great programs that enable companies to build manufacturing in developing nations like India. So, and again, there's a application you fill out, there's a process you go through. When it comes to getting a California site on the table, there's no playbook. It's make it up, you should go. It's, well, maybe we can scrimp a little money from this, a little money from that. And it's not necessarily that that's bad, because it can work. And a lot of the craft is figuring out how to get a package of incentives together. And that's what our companies have done. But it would be a lot better to be more sophisticated about it and to pretend, to recognize that our companies are not only just talking to California authorities, they're talking to people all over the world. And certainly the Oregon program is very well organized with tax breaks, with loans that are monetized, and of course that's much closer. So and Mississippi has attracted 6 clean tech companies in the past year with the kind of packages that I described earlier. So it's not that people don't, and I think you heard earlier, people. And Solaria has a facility in Fremont, and Primus will certainly develop its early stage products locally. But it's really getting that discussion to happen and figuring out how to use very scarce public dollars as investment dollars, because I think you see that the returns in terms of tax revenues and job creation are significant. We are now getting that data. So it shouldn't be seen as a giveaway. It's an investment in our state's future.
And just to expand on that for a moment, as I asked the previous panel, what other factors are you seeing as the key things or affecting the companies that you're watching, their economic health and their ability to expand?
Well, it has a lot to do with what we've been talking about, the access to capital. Certainly, some of the tax profile in California is higher than others, but our companies aren't making money, so they don't pay some of those taxes. They certainly pay payroll, they pay other kinds of tax, but they're not paying income tax yet. So that's that is, if people talk about that, it's not quite as important for early stage growth as you might think. But if you just get nickel and dimed with all kinds of service fees or taxes, then it makes it more difficult to do business here. And certainly the net metering for the solar companies putting a cap on that's too low, or trying to do what we're seeing in San Diego, you put a fee on solar users to help pay for their infrastructure, which is currently, I guess, being talked about is a case at the CPUC. Those are the kinds of things that'll grind to a halt a lot of the progress we're making.
If you wanted to add it all, Mr. Yin, please feel free. Okay, go ahead.
I'm struck with the amount of manufacturing in the solar field that China's doing, but I wanted to know if their market, their energy market, they seem to be relying on coal, and they have an abundance of coal, and they're exporting coal for producing it. I didn't see in your presentation, do we see them as an actual purchaser, and rather than an exporter? They have a part of their portfolio a solar energy or a renewable program that California might actually export if we can meet the demands that they have from a technology point of view.
Well, you're absolutely correct. There are two numbers that I shared earlier. Number one, California is exporting $1.9 billion to China of the a complete system of clean technology. It is true that their general usage in China is still relatively low in terms of percentage. Only the major cities and the major corporations or business happen to use this. Okay. Therefore, the majority of their product happen to be export, as I said, used to be to Europe. So certainly, in long term, China can be a huge market for California's manufacturers, in my opinion. And as their adoption to the system getting better and better, there will be more demand of a better quality, better products. As I said, there are so many manufacturers in China, say 500 plus, but because of this, they only do the second portion of this, or the second part of this. The raw material is still controlled by California's innovation and technology. So in my opinion, we are holding the key part of making a good quality clean products.
There are many companies that are going to export to China their clean tech products, and I could give you 3 or 4 examples. But what China is doing is saying, yeah, we're really interested in using your product, especially if it's automobile related, because China is going to have an explosive growth in auto sales over the next 5 years. But what they say is, so we want you to export, and we're going to give you, X million dollars to put a factory here being in China. So there are many headquartered companies in California that are building factories in China for that export market.
Mm-hmm.
So
the export market is a short window that's closing rapidly.
Right. I mean, they're exports, but China's, they're smart. They're saying if you want to sell your product in our country, make it here.
Okay.
I'm going to switch into our kind of conversation about CEQA or other regulatory reforms, and I'm going to frame the question with: do you feel that we have enough data or enough understanding analysis of what the what are the impediments, either the ones that really are affecting, say, the growth of the companies we've been discussing, either in CEQA or other regulations, to know yet, if we had the willingness or interest to make some revisions, to know yet what the appropriate revisions would be?
I would say we're getting there. I mean, I think we can take a stab at it. I mean, just looking, it shouldn't take 8 years to get a solar plant built, which is what it's taking in California in some circumstances, and it certainly shouldn't take a solar plant longer to be constructed than a fossil fuel or a nuclear plant. So the long review processes for some of these large-scale, utility-scale solar plants, and the risk at each juncture, whether it be a CEC approval or other state approvals, combined with the federal approvals that are required. For startup companies, time is not your friend. I mean, the longer it takes you, the higher the risk, because you have to be financing that company through that cycle. So
it might be, and again, not to say less CEQA and more the layers.
It's just that CEQA is often part of that layering. Getting the CEC to approve a certain plant or project often involves CEQA adherence. So CEQA is not there are a lot of things about CEQA that are fine, and we should not mess with it. But it's that layering. It's the lack of coordination and the queuing. You get a queue going, and there's a so if you're not in the top 5 or 6 projects, then you're not even in the game for another year. So it's unwieldy.
You talked about the playbook or a portfolio that we can have, and I noted down some ideas about net metering, green bank, CEQA adjustments, the public goods charge. Mr. Yen, you indicated to set high standards on product qualities. Do you think this is something?
The warranty's pretty good on solar panels.
It's like 20.
Inverters are a little more difficult, but it's these systems that are going up on rooftops do have a 20-year warranty. So
yeah. I guess, was there other things other than the solar portfolio in the larger green economy that you think needs some attention for warranties or warranties?
Well, my opinion on this will only to add more value to our domestic or our local residents whenever they feel more comfortable to invest money on a clean product or put the solar panel on their roofs. I like to see more usage of our own products. I like to see our technology being used over here domestically. I feel that we can take advantage of any good quality, better qualified product from anywhere else as long as they are qualified, whether from Mexico, China, or India, doesn't matter. But I would like to see that when installer offer 20-year warranty as required now, and they can stay in business for 20 years along with their manufacturer behind. What I'm concerned about is without those commitment and a solid backup, that 20-year system warranty could be just a piece of paper.
I think where the companies really need help, warranties is certainly something we have to pay a lot of attention to, but it's really the bankability issue, which is something that a green bank, a state green bank, for example, could help with, and it's that crossing the chasm. And the bankability is a newer technology is harder to get financed than an older one, and there's perceived risk in, say, even Solaria, concentrated PV, even though it looks and feels like a regular PV, it's new. And so it takes a while for finance, for banks and other financiers to get comfortable with it, even though you can make the argument, as Solaria's CEO always does, that a nuclear plant is not really bankable, and yet somehow they got finance for a long time. The issue is it's critical because those early projects are the hardest to finance. It's like, in a campaign, your first money that you raise is often the hardest. That's the same with a new system or new project. And then once you demonstrate that, then you can get all the banks. And there's no shortage of capital out there. But that helping those companies that won't get the regular funders in those early days would, I think, be a very appropriate role for public policy to intervene, and has that's been happening in other places.
Staff, you guys got anything?
I don't think we really have time to get into this subject so much, but much of what our different panels have talked about is the incentives, and many of them have been financially based. And of course, we're in a situation now with the drop in revenues and with potentially a December 15th trigger where the governor will once again cut additional funds to our higher education system, to our child care, to a variety of other. And of course, we see a lot of activity across the whole U.S. around corporate loopholes, around sort of the subsidy of corporations versus services to population. And so, of course, in that specter, both having a bit of a shortage of funds and then this kind of, what I guess I see a path to, as was described, trying to clean up or streamline our permitting and such process. But, I'm always struggling as to what other ways can we assist the growth of these companies and our efforts here that may not be in the direct financial incentives, because we may have less ability to do that right now.
Well, what I would look at what Oregon is doing, because they're not actually putting the money out there, but they're acting as a guarantee. And most of these projects, even though what you hear about Solinda may cause you to feel otherwise, are pretty low risk and are working well. And what that allows a company to do is the government doesn't have to give the company the money, but if there's a guarantee, all of a sudden the company can get a loan against that from a private capital supplier. So it's really using the government's ability to guarantee or to put up a very small fraction and that catalyzing private investment.
So very much like we've done this on the small scale with the program that the Treasurer's Office is now going to implement, where we will guarantee the loans, they're small loans, right, for up to $25,000 for distributed generation installation and efficiency improvements to residential and commercial. So again, that's smaller scale, but that,
yes,
if I understand, is analogous.
It's the same philosophy. So I think that that's working a lot of places, and it respects that government doesn't have a lot of free cash at the moment, but it also acknowledges that the catalyzing role that government can play to bring in private money.
That's it?
Go ahead.
Thank them.
Yes, we want to thank both of you very much for your experience with the activity in China, the markets in China, the government's role in China in terms of these companies, but also your perspective from your experience in California, and of course, Ms. Fund, from your very direct, hands-on investment experience with these key companies in California, and of course to our other panelists. Clearly, I think I can speak quite confidently for both Assemblymember Wieckowski and myself, and many, many, many of our legislative colleagues in both the Senate and the Assembly, and also the Governor's Office, that we, as much as we are in difficult economic times, and the government and the state obviously is in serious revenue crisis, we are very committed to doing our best to continue to not just send the right policy signals for the growth of this activity in our state, but also to communicate to the businesses that are willing to take the risks to do business in California that we want to be a good partner, that we want to do what we can to while we may not be able to compete completely in every circumstance, we do want to understand it better, and that's certainly why The Senate and the Assembly have regular policy committees, which obviously deal with bills and such, but the benefit of a select committee like this, and there's many, is that we get to dig deeper into a subject matter and try to understand better from you direct practitioners so that we can try to do our jobs better, and we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We heard a lot of good things and some things we need to work on, including a toolkit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And we thank our staff for their work in putting it together.